This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 60 people killed in militia attack in eastern DR Congo. Ethiopia in need of humanitarian aid to cushion drought-affected people. And Britain and Ukraine signed pact to bolster regional security. This is Africa Live. Hello and thank you for joining us. I am Peninah Karibe. With me in studio with the business headlines is Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. Ethiopian Airlines resumes flying the Boeing 737 MAX plane. And the U.S. considers sanctions against Sudan's military rulers if violence against protesters continues. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you.
Thank you, Uche. At least 60 people have been killed at a displaced persons camp in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Head of a local humanitarian group and a witness say the Codeco militia was responsible for the attack that has left 63 people dead. The attack took place at the Savo camp in Ituri province. According to the United Nations, the Codeco militia have killed hundreds of civilians in Ituri in recent years and forced thousands to flee their homes. IDP camps have been the latest target for attacks. The UN Migration Agency, IOM, says the Savo displacement site was home to about 4,000 people in December. We earlier spoke to John Kabwa, a resident at the Savo camp near Bule in Ituri province, and this is what he had to say.
It was about 10 p.m. when Codeco attacked a refugee camp in Mbule in Jugu and killed at least 57 and injured 18, most of them children. Security officers have been deployed, but our main concern is that the government has forsaken the people. Killings have been going on and MONUSCO is not protecting the IDPs. The killings have been happening for the last 4 years, and the internally displaced in Jugu region are not protected. The IDPs are suffering. There is no food. The government is not helping its people, and the UN has been unable to bring back peace. We don't know who will help us.
And for more on this developing story, we are joined live by CGTN's Christo Chamringa, who is in Kinshasa, and Tom Pierre Costa, Regional Media Advisor for Central and West Africa, Norwegian Refugee Council based in Niamey, Niger, via Skype. Thank you both for joining us. Chris, let's begin with you. What is the latest on the attacks at that displacement camp in Ituri province?
Well, authorities in Ituri province say that there are 50 people, at least 50 people have been admitted to a local hospital with very serious injuries. These were people who were attacked by the gunmen who stormed the internally displaced people's camp with machetes. There are local officials there who are confirming that there are 60 people who have been killed in this attack. And so there's a very sad moment for the people there. People are in mourning. The local leaders of that area have written a strongly worded letter to the government saying that they have to take the issue of the security of the people there very seriously, because people have been continuously dying, being killed by these militiamen in the area. No group has claimed responsibility for this attack, but like you mentioned, all the leaders and the army in that area are saying that this was carried out by the Codeco, the Cooperative for the Development of Congo militia, that is largely composed of people from the Lendu ethnic group that has had a long history of rivalry with another group of cattle keepers known as the Herders. And the local officials are now appealing to the government. They have made an appeal to President Felix Tshisekedi to do whatever is possible to ensure that peace is restored in their area.
Tom, the Norwegian Refugee Council has been working with the displaced in the camp. What is the situation like?
I don't hear you.
Tom, if you can hear me, we know that the NRC has been working with the displaced in the camp. What's the situation like?
Well, there has been a massacre yesterday. At 9 p.m., an armed group attacked the camp of Plain Savo, where the Norwegian Refugee Council works. There has been 59 victims, including 14 children. So obviously today there is a sense of terror in the camp, but across the region as well, because since the last month of November, there has been a new trend from armed group in attacking displacement camp, deliberately attacking displaced people. And this is a new trend. So it's very concerning and nothing justifies this violence. So we are really condemning this act today. And we are also calling authorities to make sure that there is a better protection for displaced people in Congo.
Chris, how has the government reacted to the attacks in Ituri?
Well, the government has expressed its condolences to the families of the victims, and the military governor of Ituri province says the army is going to hunt down these, the perpetrators of this violence in all their strongholds and ensure that they get justice for all the victims of this tragic violence in Ituri province. But some of the people I spoke to in Ituri province are saying these are promises, empty promises from the authorities, because whenever there's a killing, whenever people are killed in large numbers in Ituri province, the government always makes this promise that they're doing their very best to ensure that there's no killing. So people are very, very disappointed with the government. And this is one of the worst attacks in Ituri province in a very long time. Last June, there was a similar attack on a displaced people's camp. There were two camps actually, Boga and Chabi, where 50 people were killed. And so this is one of the worst attacks in a very long time, because this conflict between the Hema and the Lendu is a long one that dates back to the 1990s, and that time it sucked in countries from the neighboring region. So people there are looking for a long-lasting solution to this problem, where all the time people have to flee their homes to neighboring areas, people who are already struggling to just put food on their table. Peninah?
And Tom, people looking for a long-lasting solution, you said nothing justifies this kind of attacks. What do you think needs to be done to avoid such attacks in the future?
Well, there needs to be more dialogue between communities. This violence has been rising since 2017 in Ituri region in northeast Congo. It's mainly an intercommunal conflict between Hemas, who are herders, who have cattle, and Lendus, who are farmers. So they fight over land, and nothing has been done really to put them together and to make them discuss at the table. So this needs to be prioritized, but in the same time, what needs to be done as well is to talk about Congo not only when there is a massacre. People are getting killed every day in this region, but in Congo there is more than 5 million people displaced and 30 million people facing hunger. So what needs to be done is that we need to talk about Congo more regularly. It needs to be prioritized by political leaders, needs to be covered more by the media, and more funds need to be given by the international community and donor governments. That's what needs to be done.
Oh, thank you very much, Tom Pierre Costa, live for us in Niamey, Niger, and Christo Chamringa live in Kinshasa, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Let's head to Guinea-Bissau. President Umaru Sissoco Embalo has broken his silence after surviving an attempted coup. Embalo says many members of the security forces had been killed, repelling an attack that may have been linked to drug trafficking. This, as the UN Secretary General said, he was deeply concerned by the growing number of coups in the West African region. CGTN's Joy Kiruki-Juma reports.
These were the scenes emerging from the capital of Guinea-Bissau in the latter part of Tuesday, a government compound where President Umaru Sissoco Embalo was chairing a cabinet meeting under attack. The unclear situation saw the African Union and ECOWAS condemn what they called an attempted coup. Appearing in the evening, Embalo said the attackers had tried entering the compound just after the cabinet meeting but were repelled.
This was an attempt not only of a coup, but to kill the President of the Republic and all my cabinet, but they were not able to get in.
The first moving events in the former Portuguese colony on the West African coast came just over a week after the military in Burkina Faso, another country in the region, deposed the president. According to Embalo, the attack in Bissau was well organized and related to people in the drug trade.
We were attacked with very heavy weaponry for 5 hours. But now everything is under control. And one thing I can assure you, there is no side that is linked to this coup attempt. It is an isolated force, but it is also linked to the people who fought. When I was elected President of the Republic, I promised to fight two things: corruption and drug trafficking.
Poverty-stricken Guinea-Bissau is viewed by the UN as a major transit point for Latin American cocaine headed for Europe.
It is for us clear that coups are totally unacceptable. We are seeing a terrible multiplication of coups, and our strong appeal is for soldiers to go back to the barracks and for the constitutional order to be fully in place in the democratic context of today's Guinea-Bissau.
We want to make sure that there's a united stand, not just by the Security Council, but by the international community as a whole, against all military seizures of power, be it in Burkina Faso or anywhere else.
Embalo, who has enjoyed strong support from the military during a previous political crisis, has defended the army against any involvement in Tuesday's coup attempt. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
Families living in Ethiopia's lowland regions are struggling to survive a severe drought, which is drying up water wells, killing livestock and crops, and pushing hundreds of thousands of children and their families to the brink. The country now requires urgent humanitarian assistance to cushion the affected population. CGTN's Wilkis Tanyabwa with the details.
In Ethiopia's lowland region, a severe drought has caused everything to dry up. 3 consecutive failed rainy seasons have left families in dire need of humanitarian assistance.
It is a drought that is affecting almost 7 million people on their livelihood, on food security, and it is something which is already pretty advanced and bad, but that could worsen dramatically if the next rainy season, which is due in April, after mid-April, would not come in the way it should come.
UNICEF estimates that there are 225,000 malnourished children and over 100,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women in need of urgent nutrition support.
We have animals dying at an impressive rate, which is increasing every month, and death of animal means lack of food for children, for families, lack of money, of course, to buy food, lack of milk, and that is definitely something which is already happening.
In affected areas, the population has begun to move from the lowlands to the highlands, leaving behind young children who are unable to travel and taking older children forced to drop out of school. It is projected that in 2022, an estimated 850,000 children in the region will be severely malnourished due to multiple causes, including conflict, drought, and an economic downturn. UNICEF is now looking to raise $31 million to stage interventions in the affected areas. Wilkis Anyabwa, CGTN.
Day 1 of a 2-day high-level inter-ministerial meeting has just ended in Addis Ababa, and CGTN's Gurum Chala joins us live for more. Gurum, could you tell us what was discussed and what were some of the resolutions?
Peninah, good evening. Here at the African Union headquarters, the Executive Council, membered by foreign ministers of member states of the African Union, have been holding meetings, and some of the most important issues raised here were COVID-19 related and how the pandemic affected the continent. At the opening ceremony, Musa Faki Mohammed, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, said that Africa is severely affected by this pandemic, and something that has never been seen over the last perhaps a decade or so has been seen, especially when it comes to the effects on the economy. He said $154 billion is now needed for African economies to recover from the effects of the pandemic. On the other hand, Peninah, this Executive Council has discussed how worrying it is that only 10% of Africans have been vaccinated of a COVID-19 vaccination, and they have agreed to redouble their efforts so that more vaccinations can be available for the continent. In general terms, these are the most important issues, but peace and security and other agendas were also on the tables of these leaders.
So, Gurum, what do you expect to be discussed in tomorrow's meeting?
Well, tomorrow, more or less, Peninah, is going to be the continuation of the issues that I was just mentioning earlier. The recommendations on way out of COVID-19 related issues on the continent, vaccination allocation, and also some other issues. Reports will be heard as well from different departments of the African Union and also its sister agencies, the regional communities and others will also be heard by these Executive Council members. As you know, their mandate is more or less to prepare resolutions for the heads of state who are going to be coming together over the weekend to deliberate on. So they will be wrapping up most of the issues, and recommendations will be placed on the tables of the presidents and the heads of state when they meet over the weekend here in Addis Ababa. So we have to wait and hear what strong resolutions are going to come out after the meeting of the heads of state. Peninah.
Okay, thank you for that update. Grum Chala live for us in Addis Ababa. The African Union has called for a concerted effort in addressing the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on African economies. The call comes as the continent continues to reel from devastating financial losses. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports.
The COVID-19 pandemic caught Africa, like the rest of the world, unprepared. From struggling healthcare systems to lack of vaccines, the continent is yet to contain the virus.
Today, our senses are awoken, and a race to improve our health systems and manufacture locally is afoot. Africa is surviving the health pandemic, but our economies are stretched.
At the opening of the AU ordinary session of the Executive Council in Addis Ababa, delegates called for a collective response to the pandemic.
So as Africa CDC and the Africa Union, we are supporting our member states to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 on the economic and social sectors on this continent.
Despite positive strides to tackle COVID-19, the economic cost of managing the pandemic have remained high.
The lockdowns have meant that the economy of the country and the social system of the countries come to a total grind.
According to the AU, Africa's debt to GDP has risen from 40% in 2014 to at most 70% in 2022. Projected growth of 3.9% in 2022 is expected to do little to address the economic impacts of the pandemic. Africa has so far registered over 10.8 million positive cases with over 239,000 deaths. The African Union says that equity must be considered as a priority safety net to protect countries with few resources if the continent is to effectively contain the devastating impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
France is easing some COVID-19 rules from Wednesday, despite daily new infections still topping 400,000. The government insists the decision has been taken carefully, but many COVID wards are still strained as Omicron now accounts for a majority of COVID-19 related deaths, overtaking the Delta variant. Ryan Thompson has more from Paris.
COVID rules are easing across France, but the change is hard to see. Vaccine passes and face masks have become the new normal here. But from Wednesday, life is getting even closer to what it was like before the pandemic.
Tous les équipements, notamment sportifs.
All facilities, especially sports and cultural facilities that receive seated audiences, will be able to operate at full capacity without a limit if they still respect the obligation to wear a mask. At the same time, remote working will no longer be compulsory, but will remain recommended, leaving it to companies to maintain the right level. Wearing a mask will no longer be required when being outdoors.
France has been progressively easing COVID restrictions since the summer, thanks to a vaccination rate over 90%. But the gears were put in reverse in December, when the Omicron variant started to spread across the country, even among those who were vaccinated. Among dozens of new rules that were introduced, cafes could only provide table service, and nightclubs had to The government insists that Wednesday's easing is a measured decision because Omicron cases have peaked in many regions and Delta infections are declining. But Omicron cases now account for a majority of COVID hospital deaths. And some doctors say they're still struggling 2 years into the pandemic.
The new COVID waves are worse. It's just worse. We have all the problems of COVID and the system is literally falling apart on all sides. It's much more difficult.
And Wednesday's easing is just step one. More rules will be scrapped in 2 weeks' time with the reopening of nightclubs and the return of refreshments to cinemas and stadiums. As of just 1 week ago, all of these venues are now only open to those who are fully vaccinated because of vaccine pass rules, which the government says will be in place for at least 6 months. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Paris.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up, mixed doubles curling kicks off Winter Olympics at the National Aquatic Center in Beijing. And we'll look at some of the rules and fun facts about curling.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
The tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from within the front clear line. view of this front line position.
The Beijing Winter Olympics opening ceremony is 2 days away, but the games have already begun. The mixed doubles curling events have just started at the National Aquatic Center. Team China, comprised of 25-year-old Fan Su-yuan and her partner Ling Ji, is facing off against Team Switzerland. There will be 147 curling matches over the next 19 days. Meanwhile, the torch that will light the Olympic flame at the opening ceremony on Friday began its relay this morning. The first torchbearer left from Beijing's Olympic Forest Park. The relay route runs through parts of Beijing and the competition zones in Yanqing and Zhangjiakou. The Danish women's ice hockey team says it's ready for competition on Thursday. This is the first time the team has made it to the Winter Games. They qualified for the Beijing Games after winning their final Olympic qualification tournament in Germany in November. Our reporter Sen Ji-yuan caught up with them after practice to talk about the upcoming events and Beijing's COVID control.
It's really good. It's good at being on the ice and get the legs started, and it's just fun to be here, and we are gonna do our best every time.
It's been good. Of course, we had some jet lag when we first came here. Of course, that was expected. But we've been here a few days now, and it's been really great just to be on the ice, hard work, and be together and do our stuff. So it's been amazing and feels great.
Well, of course, it is setting boundaries for every team. Everyone is equal, so everyone is going through this. And I think actually we will grow as a part, as all athletes, as a team, because we have to stick together, even though that there is COVID, even though that there are restrictions. You just have to fight them together to be the best you can be on the ice and off the ice.
Our reporter Dong Shui was at the Beijing Olympic Forest Park where the torch relay began at 9 a.m. local time. She filed the following report.
3 days, 11 different locations, approximately 1,200 torch bearers from home and abroad. The torch relay of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics has begun. Showcasing Beijing as the only city that has hosted both the Summer and Winter Games, the flame will be passed on through the city proper, the northwest Yanqing district, and neighboring Zhangjiakou, a co-host of the city. The starting point is the Beijing Olympic Forest Park. The torchbearers with backgrounds ranging from science, culture, and public health, and between the ages of 14 and 86, will run through the Badaling section of the Great Wall via the Nihewan Ruins and Fulong Ski Resort and the Summer Palace. Nearly 60% of the Chinese citizens in the relay are frontline workers. International runners from more than 20 countries and regions are also taking part. Due to the pandemic, several health and safety measures have been taken to reduce the length and duration of the relay. However, you can still feel the joy and excitement here. And for the general public, there's an online campaign launched for the relay in January. It not only boosts the enthusiasm for the upcoming games, but also allow them to participate in this iconic event. Dong Xue, CGTN, Beijing.
One highly anticipated sport at the Olympics is curling. CGTN's Zhong Shi looks at some fun facts about the sport.
Welcome to a winter wonderland here in Beijing. For local residents, it's almost a ritual to come here every winter and enjoy what this season has to offer. This year, the crowds are bigger, passions hotter, as the Winter Olympics has come to Beijing. Skating, as you can see, has found a solid fan base here, but other competitive events are also growing in popularity. One of them, curling. Curling is a team sport played on ice. It's named after the unique turning that occurs at the end of the curling stone's path on the ice. The sport is also known as chess on ice because it involves a lot of strategy and precision. This is the stone, which is the main component to curling. Each curling stone weighs nearly 20 kilograms. During the games, stones collide frequently. To ensure stones are hard enough and do not crack easily in low temperatures, all stones are made from granite. Rare granite. But one thing you need to know, curling is not to be played on ice like this. The sheet of the ice that curling is played on has many bumps, known as pebbles. A curling stone with such weight can only go smoothly with the help of the pebbles. They minimize the area between the bottom of the curling stone and ice, and therefore minimize the friction. I guess for many people, the most impressive part of curling is the athletes sweeping the ice sheet with the broom. That motion in curling we call soup is actually to work on the pebbles. The sweeping can quickly melt the pebbles on the ice, leaving a film of water, which would help the stone travel farther or change the trajectory of the stone. However, any ice can be so slippery. How can athletes soup but not slip? The secret is here. A pair of curling shoes has two different soles, a slider and a gripper. The slider is most commonly made of Teflon. It helps the athlete to slide smoothly. And the gripper is made from soft rubber and will give more traction on the ice. This year, curling is where all the excitement starts as it marks the beginning of all games in the Beijing Winter Olympics. We wish all athletes travel as close to their destination as possible.
Let's now cross over to Uche for the latest in business news.
Thank you, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Ethiopian Airlines resumes flying the Boeing 737 MAX plane. And the U.S. considers sanctions against Sudan's military rulers if violence against protesters continues.
With some of the highest natural sanctions in the world, Namibia is a mecca for scent borders. Being extreme personalities, the search to conquer the most difficult ride never ends. Rarely do you find one who's also passionate and caring about his community. His township tours connect two worlds and empower the local people. His other love, football, keeps the kids off the street and provides them with an opportunity to better their lives further down the road. This is Raymond, enriching his community one step at a time.
Now, Ethiopian Airlines is due to resume flying the Boeing 737 MAX plane, and that's after a successful demonstration flight. The carrier took journalists, diplomats and officials from Addis Ababa around Mount Kilimanjaro, which is Africa's biggest mountain, and back to the Ethiopian capital on Tuesday. Now, the airline in a statement said last month that the decision followed intense recertification by multiple regulatory bodies. Other countries already flying the 737 MAX include the United States, Europe, China, Australia, Japan and Indonesia. The decision, however, remains painful to some relatives of those killed in the Ethiopian Airlines crash of March 2019.
In the past few days, it has been running a lot of test flights by our flight crew and flight engineers and flight mechanics. After we made sure everything is in order, now we are doing this demonstration public relation flight, a demo flight, so to speak. It is after this that we are availing it to commercial aviation.
Personally, it's a decision that I'll never fly in a MAX. And certainly, if I find myself booked into a MAX, I'll have to cancel that flight. That is a decision I made, and I know other family members who have made similar decisions across the victims. Yes, because, and I have explained that, it is already an unstable plane. We should not be part of sanctification of something we know is wrong.
Now, the Boeing 737 MAX plane attracted global attention following a March 2019 flight that, of course, crashed 6 minutes after takeoff in Addis Ababa, killing all 157 passengers and crew. The accident followed another one 5 months earlier when the same model crashed in Indonesia, killing 189 people. Now, CGTN's Girum Chale looks back at the fateful model and why it could take some people some time to fully embrace it.
In 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, a Boeing 737 MAX bound for Kenya, crashed 6 minutes after takeoff from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, killing all 157 passengers and crew. The best-selling single-aisle airplane, which was grounded worldwide after 2 crashes, killed 346 people in the space of 5 months. In a press conference right after the crash, Ethiopian Airlines CEO Tewolde ገብረማርያም said the plane was safe to fly with no technical issues.
It is a brand new airplane with no technical remarks, flown by senior pilots, and there is no cause that we cannot attribute at this time. But as you know, it is international practice that international investigators, Ethiopian civil aviation investigators, and also from the aircraft manufacturer from the US, the NTCB will be participating in the investigation.
After the deadly incident, a lot has been said and done, including months-long investigative works, many court cases against Boeing by families of the deceased, and repetitive works to improve the flawed software behind the fatal crash. The plane maker has also admitted full responsibility for the crash. The MAX planes returned to service in late 2020, and one of the last carriers to resume using these planes has become Ethiopian Airlines. Still, some oppose the move and say it is too soon to make a sound decision.
The reason I don't agree with that decision is we have not seen any major changes or Boeing taking responsibility for the crashes that took hundreds of lives, Ethiopians and Indonesians, and a lot of travelers and passengers from around the world. Boeing did not even want to change the name Boeing 737 MAX 8 for whatever reason, and keeping this name, speaking for my clients, and many of the passengers and the families that I am fortunate to meet, and some I represent, always told me that hearing this name, just the fact that the name 737 MAX 8 being mentioned brings back a lot of trauma.
Ethiopian Airlines has more than 4 of Boeing's MAX planes in its fleet at the moment, and a few others have also been ordered with undisclosed delivery dates. Ethiopian Airlines is one of the most successful and most profitable airliners in Africa. It's also one of the few aviation industry operators which maintained a growth trajectory in these difficult COVID-19 pandemic times. Analysts say the return of the 737 MAX planes will maximize its performances. Group Jala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, let's shift focus now. The United States is prepared to impose additional costs on Sudan, and that's if violence against protesters continues in the country. Now, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Molly Fee, said on Tuesday that Washington is now looking at options to increase pressure and has made it clear to Sudan's military leaders. Fee also told the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee that the United States is reviewing the full range of traditional and non-traditional tools at its disposal. The idea is to reduce funds available to Sudan's military leadership and isolate its military-controlled companies. Now, Washington is also looking at tools to increase the reputational risk for those that choose to continue to engage in business as usual with Sudanese security services. Meanwhile, Egypt is considering replacing a popular bread subsidy with cash payments for the poor in order to protect the budget from soaring global wheat prices. However, domestic inflation and a history of protests could make the government opt for a less ambitious reform. Now, under the existing program, more than 60 million Egyptians, or nearly 2/3 of the population, get about 5 loaves of round bread daily for 50 cents a month. While it is a lifeline to the poor, it is widely criticized as wasteful. Now, high global prices for wheat, which Egypt imports on a vast scale, have made the subsidy quite expensive for the government. Egypt's supply minister, Ali Mouseli, said he personally favors giving people money specifically to buy bread. Now, eligible Egyptians already get a monthly $3.20 voucher for other subsidized food. And in Zambia, the government expects a debt health check by the International Monetary Fund to be finalized this month. This should be in time to strike a restructuring deal with creditors by April and get a formal agreement with the fund signed off in May. Now, Finance Minister Situmbeko Musoko also says that the country has reached out to Chinese authorities, asking them to be part of the process, and that they have agreed in principle. But the specific details remain to be worked out. Of course, Zambia became the first country to default on its sovereign debt in 2020, and that was owing to a debt burden of more than 120% of its GDP. The country reached a staff-level deal on a $1.4 billion 3-year extended credit facility with the IMF in December. It now wants to nail down a formal agreement. Meanwhile, South Sudan's government says that it is working on reducing taxes on businesses in the country in a bid to attract investment. Now, relative peace has returned to the country after the 2018 peace deal, but the 6-year civil war has left the country's economy in ruins, with foreign direct investment almost non-existent, except in the oil sector. Here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet with more.
Business people in South Sudan say their costs keep rising. There is no centralized taxation system. Government agencies such as Revenue Authority, Fire Brigade, City Council and state governments set their own taxes and levy them on businesses, and each agency collects their dues separately.
They close, even the supermarket, they have closed, remaining only us. The most difficult challenges we are facing is the city council that they are charging us, even the government, even the rent, the house rent is too much. This is the major problem we are facing, and the business is not booming very well.
COVID-19 has negatively affected small and medium enterprises here. There are also currently no financial services such as loans that businesses can access. South Sudan's government says the country is endowed with abundant natural resources such as arable land. However, to get investors into the country remains a challenge due to unpredictable security situation. The country's investment ministry says it has unearthed a scam by suspected government officials who take money from potential investors and issue them fake certificates, and it is now working on simplifying the tax system to attract more investment.
Our researchers went to the market and they could able to raise more than 28 taxes which are actually leveled on the business, which is really too much in this country. We are discussing it in financial reform management.
It also says it wants to use the current prevailing peace to promote investment in the country and unlock the economy's potential. Patrick Koyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, traders in Ghana want the government to step up its efforts to stabilize the country's currency, the cedi. Of course, more on that coming up atop of the hour. For now, it's back to you.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live. Plenty more coming up, including this. Belgium approves legal framework to return DR Congo's relics.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Have approved a legal framework to return thousands of artworks that were stolen from its former colony, the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the late 19th century. Up to 2,000 artworks were acquired illegally by Belgian officials during the colonial period. CGTN's Christo Chamringa has that report from Kinshasa.
The new law passed by the Belgian government will change the legal status of the artworks plundered from the Democratic Republic of Congo from state property to private property. That will enable them to be returned to the DRC. The Belgian officials also adopted a bilateral agreement with the DRC on scientific and cultural cooperation. Thousands of art pieces, including statues, ivory masks, and musical instruments, were stolen from the DRC by Belgian collectors from the late 19th century to 1960. Many of them are currently displayed in Belgian museums. Belgium launched a program to examine the origin of the artworks from the DRC in July last year, after the Black Lives Matter protests in the US. The decision to return the artworks has been welcomed by many in the DRC. The DRC government plans to house the artworks in the country's new National Museum, which was inaugurated in 2019 by President Felix Tshisekedi. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Nigeria has recorded enormous growth in the digital space in recent years, but the growth has not been even across the country. The north of Nigeria is still lagging behind in digital literacy. One IT startup in that part of the country has taken up the challenge to change the narrative. Here's CGTN's Deji Bademosi with that story.
Meet the man who's taking up the rather daunting task of bridging the digital gap between the north and south of Nigeria. In a part of the country where digital literacy is low and in some cases considered a luxury, Raphael Issa is not only trying to help young people from the north acquire digital literacy skills, he's also empowering them to secure their future through technology. And he's succeeding. When he launched GraceSoft back in 2015, a session like this was hardly packed. But today, more young people in his base in Kaduna, northwest Nigeria, are signing up to his digital literacy initiative.
We're trying to achieve proper structure for MSMEs, trying to see that startups are properly structured, especially those of them that are tech inclined. We're trying to see that we are able to solve our own problems right here in the north using technology. The good thing is that as of now, we have a governor who is tech inclined. He's tech savvy, someone who appreciates technology, and his government has done quite a lot of things that shows that, yes, indeed, technology is the way forward.
Issa has since gone on to create different arms of Greysoft to address different challenges. Today, there's Grey Tech, which builds applications to solve various problems. Grey Create focuses on filmmaking and creating local content. And then there's also Grey Hub, which serves as an incubator and co-working space for startups and provides mentorship as well.
When startups are starting, their greatest challenge, one of their greatest challenge, of course, will be to rent a facility. They don't even have money. They're just starting, right? And they can't recruit the proper team that they need at that level. They can't afford to pay salaries. When you come to they can't buy 24-hour electricity, neither can they buy 24-hour internet service. So when you come to this place for a very small token, right, you have access to Grey Hub. So you can have access to 24-hour electricity, 24-hour light. You can have meetings with your clients in this place. You can have access to our business incubation and acceleration programs. You can have access to our business mentors. You have access to informal teams. And that means that the next person sitting by your side is just able to answer the next question that you're looking for someone to do for you.
Step by step, Issa is making great strides in providing digital literacy through Greysoft. The number of young people in the north enrolling in Greysoft is growing, and so is the number of startups springing up in that part of Nigeria.
So as more people come into tech in the north, you know that it brings about accountability, it brings about effectiveness, it brings about transparency, and it brings about resourcefulness. So by 2025, one of the things that will really satisfy us is to see that we have empowered well over 100,000 people. And we are trying to see that more people will come to understand that with the requisite knowledge of digital literacy, with the right level of digital literacy, they can, as a matter of fact, have a better life.
Bridging the digital gap between the north and south of Nigeria certainly requires a painstaking and consistent effort, knowing that the south is not slowing down in its expansion of digital literacy. But Issa has started a marathon race with Greysoft, and he says he will not slow down in his quest to drive digital literacy in a region that badly needs it. Deji Bademosi, CGTN, Kaduna, Nigeria.
And coming up in sports news, Burkina Faso optimistic to shock Senegal in their semi-final at the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations in Cameroon.
How would you create